Suddenly I'm very emotional because there's such a good feeling here in this group. And I've connected with many of you, and I felt your hearts, and I felt your sparkling minds, seen your eyes. So I want to bring you something very special. This is the first time these ideas have been presented. But I first want to begin with this. This is what you might call the grounded ground. I know you're all into groundless ground. But what this is your ancestor. This is your ancestor. This is a stromatolite from Western Australia that I picked up last July. And there are little ridges on it. And those are ridges made by our deepest ancestor, microbial mat communities that cement sand grains together in order to keep growing up and keep access to the light. Think about that. And they made us. They detoxified our world. They put oxygen in the atmosphere. They made our soils, and then they birthed all this. They erupted into this. And when I hold this, I feel it. And my mind goes back further to their ancestors. And this is the tale I'm going to tell you today. But if you are interested, I'd like to hand this out and just spend a few seconds with it and pass it on to someone else. It'll give you a connection. So science may be on the verge of one great discovery, perhaps the greatest discovery of science other than the work, of course, that Joel is doing and his colleagues about the cosmos. This may be the next great discovery. We may soon know how the living world animated itself into existence. The discovery is going to be one of our greatest teachers. It's going to teach us about ourselves and where we can go and what this world is. And coming face to face with that ancestor, whether it be in your hand or in a laboratory dish, is going to help us realize our destiny. And in support of Nancy, it's going to help us to understand what God is. So what I was holding in my hand was a stromatolite. Here's another one. Some of the oldest evidence for life on Earth from Western Australia. Those are the little red nodules you see. They're embedded in the mineral called barite in a hot spring setting. And this was the discovery that was announced this summer on the cover of Scientific American. So when this all started, I think all of us when we're little kids are mystics, right? Were you a mystic when you were little? So when I was 9, I made a deal with my future selves that my future selves should not send bad thoughts back to the previous selves. Because I didn't know you couldn't do that. So I saw suddenly, because I was going to turn 10, I thought it was a big deal, so I saw all my future selves lined up. I said, oh, hi. Here, here's a contract. If you sign this contract, you'll agree never to send bad thoughts backwards, because the little self is always doing its best job it can. And they all signed it. And so, whoa, everything just opened. Probability space went like this. And then I turned 10. So one of the things I did with that opening was I realized I could project forward into the future and get an intention and really start seeing it shimmering into space. And when I was 14, I was walking in the hills near Canada, in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada, where I'm from, and a Mariposa lily was coming out of the frozen ground. It was beautiful, and I loved Mariposa lilies. And then I remembered something came into my mind, like I just read about this guy, Albert Einstein. And he was a mystic, trippy teenager too. Like at 16, he had a dream about running alongside a beam of light, and that led to special relativity, And I said, well, okay, that's a cool thing for you to do. And then it flashed in my head, wait a minute, this Mariposa lily comes from a bulb or a seed, which is running some kind of a thing that makes all this structure. But all of these plants are running things that make their structure, but there had to be an original thing that made all of that. And my mind went into the past, billions of years back, like, what? Where was I? I was searching. My consciousness was going to search for that. And suddenly, a thought experiment started. Oh, okay, here's the thought experiment. This thing appeared in space in front of me. I thought, oh, cool, okay, first thought experiment, my version of the beam of light. It was this seething mass of molecules. Because I was trying to figure out, like, how could simple things come together and make complex things on their own, you know? I was a gearhead even then. So I was about to ask this bundle of molecules, like, are you going to give me the answer? And instead, it asked me the question, figure out how we made a copy of ourselves. And I said, well, but you need a big machine to make a copy of little machines, like a factory and automobiles. So it's not possible. I don't see a big machine around here. And it winked. So 40 years later, on this long quest through computing, through organizing conferences with Richard Dawkins, to doing vision quests, you name it, I was always on this track, always following this track. This is me at Bumpass Hell in Mount Lassen National Park, on camera, with the last samples we had that we did not destroy, trying to polymerize RNA in a fumarole vent. And there it is. There's our packed together slide tray. And there's our RNA. We're able to polymerize RNA in a volcanic prebiotic analog. We took all this stuff back to the lab and encapsulated it in our little protocells. Again, this is at UC Santa Cruz. So I thought, well, wow, we found a way in the field for nature to synthesize these stringy molecules called RNA and peptides, which become proteins in your body. We found that through drying down a little pool, which was in that case in that fumarole vent, we can make these things. We can make lots of them. Nature could have made lots of them. So I was a nerdy kid, and I thought, well, how do I explain this to other nerdy people that understand now we're in a room full of computing people, right? You know, in 1980, there was like one computer person around. They were weird, right? The weird person. And you've all been assimilated now. So I can now present this model. So how does nature wind itself up and create life from scratch? Well, I came up with this idea of a paper tape puncher, because I have a collection of vintage computers. And the first vintage computers from the Homebrew Club were programmed with punch this through paper tape. And that tape can be read into the simple computer, which can turn on some lights. It runs in a thing called a processor, which either runs the program or crashes out, right? It's a random program. Well, if the ones that run are repunched, like program A worked, we punch it and we punch program B onto it, we keep going, we evolve the computer. Just randomly. We go from a PC to a laptop to a smartphone. And this is a dumb way to write programs, but it works. So we pay something that's a little bit more intelligent than this called engineers to do it for us instead. So the evolution of software and hardware together, this is plausible. You could write software this way. So where do you find this in nature? You find this in little ponds, Darwin's warm little ponds. You can polymerize through drying down, just like I showed you, in a little pond driven by a hot spring. It's a pump, it's an action, it goes up and down, forming a bathtub ring, in between which you have a polymerizer, lipids that squeeze down and make your polymers. And then those polymers are put back into bubbles and tested as little programs. We can do this in the lab every day now. And Darwin is our program runner, running a program called natural selection, and they either, the protocells, they're called pop, or they don't. So here it is, the full hot spring origin of life model. We start with our Archean or Hadean landscape 4 billion years ago, synthesize all our stuff in space. They're landing in our little ponds, coming and accumulating. They concentrate enough to do chemistry, as was mentioned earlier. You need things crowded together at the right scales. Then you find the right cycling pool that goes through wet and dry and moist, wet and dry and moist, wet and dry and moist. And then you end up with something in the moist phase, this little sludge of gel. That's our common ancestor, believe it or not. That sludge of gel gets evolved and becomes more and more robust. Then it washes down into another pool, or it blows the wind, and it scatters all over the landscape, and it creates the roots of the tree of life. So those things scattering all around, one day, those little protocells in the sludge learn the trick of dividing on their own. That's the transition into life from the progenote era. Then they can go global and colonize the world, making stromatolites like you're about to have in your hand. There it is. And this has been published on the cover of this magazine now for everybody to know. And here's what the article looks like. And they took my artwork and they did this beautiful spiral. And Ken Wilber fell in love with this when I went to see him. It was like, oh my God, it spirals all the way down to the core. We're looking at the eye of creation. It was a cool conversation. And I'm part of a site selection team for NASA, and this is the Mars 2020 rover, and we're going to convince them by next year to land this at a place where they could go and find things like that rock that you're passing around. We could find evidence for life on another world in 3 years if they take our advice, and if we find that needle in a haystack of finding a stromatolite on Mars. So here it all is. Here's your landscape. There's your cycle. And it's all about cycling. And the cycling produces the common ancestor, brings you into being. But this is what's happening every day outside. It was right in front of us. We had a drought in California. We have rain. We have moist soils, huge metabolism. Seeds are made. The seeds then go out in capsules. They come back down. They wait for the next moist cycle. It's still happening now. It's the pattern from the little pool. So I then asked the question, what about the building blocks of this? What can this teach us about everything, including consciousness? I had a dream one night, and I asked, is it necessary to have a gray-bearded man standing there that says, move those 5 carbon atoms 5 angstroms to the right, during the origin of life? And the dream said, no, that's an unnecessary complication. Let me show you how you were made. So this is the abstract version. So there's physics. You push on one thing, and it rolls to another place. But when you get a membranous capsule that occurs, that's where things can wiggle through, this is like a little protocell, they become more likely to happen. More reactions are more probable. It's a probability machine. Then when 2 membranous compartments are next to each other, they start communicating. That's an internetworking system. Physics doesn't do networking and message passing very well. When you get a whole bunch of them, you get this density, and the thing goes nonlinear on you because they're all snuggled together. So you get this system of this protocellular mass that has 3 properties: probability tweaking, it can do things more and more improbable, more and more likely through time, and an interconnectome, and memory. From that, it emerges a little short genetic function. It can remember things for the next round, called a gene. It's called books and things today. So it's a 3-way cycling system. Probability engine that makes interconnections happen, that creates more memory, that creates more probable things, make more probability, goes around and around and around. It cycles and cycles, and makes everything. It generates all of the living world, makes observable phenomena, creates our experience, and creates this huge field that we're only now beginning to sense, this field of whatever it is. And our consciousness is only able to sense a fragment of that field. So what about the emergence of consciousness? Well, I put it forward that the physics of the cosmos before life is a 2-cycle engine. State changes, stars form, explode. State changes, but no memory system. But when life comes into being, you have biology, and it can remember things. It has linear polymers, linear memory. It can build up a store of data through this 3-way triangle thing. Then when neurons appear, you have a system capable of learning in the lifetime of the organism. That's a phase transition. Then pack enough neurons together, you get a system that's conscious. It's starting to have self-awareness. It's starting to be able to do planning and things. So what does this spiral of the origin life keeps spiraling up until you get conscious self-awareness. What does this turn into? It turns into what we all feel in this room. It turns into this. This thing, which is awareness of itself, awareness of all of life through the body, through the mind, through the heart, through science, through knowledge, seeing our ancestor, feeling the power of that, feeling the power of 4 billion years of evolution and 13.8 billion years of cosmic evolution rolling through your system when you open, when you awaken. What is this? I think it's this. It's us. We're doing it, and we're doing it in this time. And we're doing a new thing. We're undergoing a new Copernican revolution. This is the potential basis for a second Copernican revolution, except the center is now the origin. The creator is this that made us. It's still making us all the time. And what this does, this little progenote, this boot up phase of life, the sludge, if you will, very ignoble. Maybe it'll get the Ig Nobel Prize. It's already, in our field, it's rippling through chemistry. This concept of this cycling system away from equilibrium. It's rolling into evolutionary biology with our colleagues at Oxford. It's rolling into geology because it's like, oh, life is on land all the time. That changes everything. It's rolling into life in the universe, search for life on Mars. Probability of life arising quickly. It's rolling into physics now with our colleagues at UCSC that Federico put us together with. It's like, wait a minute, physics is capable of linear information because polymers self-assemble. Isn't that your physics territory still? Oh, no, that's biology. No, that's yours still, I think. So physics can make linear information through self-assembly. Complexity theory and AI. This is going to teach us how to build real AIs that aren't rigid and fall over. Real, powerful AIs. It could teach us how our economy is an internetworked, collaborative thing, because this is actually everything is. Change our idea about political economy, rolls into physics and into metaphysics and philosophy, Ken Wilber lighting up, and spiritual inquiry, because it's all about cycling. Cycles, cycles, cycles. It's the Tao that's going everywhere all the time. We're in it. So the wonderful discovery suggests that our common ancestor, and this is the money, the power moment, this is the real coin in the slot machine here, that our common ancestor was not a competing individual cell. It was not. There was never a common ancestor. It was a collaborative symbiotic community. The common ancestor was a community. I'll say it again. The common ancestor was a collaborative community. It's the only plausible way. Competing cells need a lot of technology. Didn't have that then. In the Hadean, you had to work together to survive those conditions. And the only thing that could lift a simple machine into a complex machine is a network of machines working together. And this is all empirically testable in the lab in chemistry. So the machine that made us, the cycling cosmos, winds up the living world. And when we get into the state where we can have ability to observe that, when we consciously open to the vast reality that Joel and Nancy brought to us this morning, but also look back in our ancestry and know where we came from, know what our creator is, then we can come into a total non-dual union with it. Here's something, a tool for your future. Here's a prediction, because this is theory and it's testing out. Here's a prediction that you can all work on. Our intention has volition over our future. Remember when I did that thing where I projected into my future as a little kid? That we shape this massive probability engine through intention, through aspiration, Nancy said. So, and that may be the greatest tool we will ever have. So intention shapes probability. How does that work? Okay, let's take a look. Stepping stones. These are probabilistic events on the left. Valleys of probability. The present, through your intention, I think, shapes future probable events. And the little events roll like marbles down into the valleys. And if you pick them up in your lifetime, like I did when I was 10 and when I did when I was 14, I kept picking up those marbles like, oh, really? I should do that next? Okay, fine, I'll do it. You can come to miracles, seemingly miracle synchronicities like sand arise out of this probabilistic agency of our deepest ancestor. That may be the greatest tool to allow us to realize our destiny. So back to my own personal miracle. I had a vision of this guy, saw the flower, got the thought experiment, and it arose to this very improbable, miraculous thing, this new model. 40 years, staying with it. But who delivered the original thought experiment? You may ask, where did that come from? Huh? 14-year-old kid. Perhaps, as Nancy was saying, it is God emerging, giving me that vision, because it's the whole system. I was asking the question of the whole system, where did we come from? I got an answer. I got the challenge to find the answer. So perhaps it is God emerging, finally understood, finally real in the scientific age. The power of the emergent phenomenon, especially the probability tweaking engine. So I want to acknowledge all of the support and colleagues that made this work possible. And of course, Nick Day, who is the reason I'm here, and Maurizio and Zaya and all of SAND to invite me to present these brand new ideas. These are fresh. This has never been presented anywhere. But I want to ask you this very seriously. Everyone here, would you trust this man really? Thank you.